courage over fear is the foundation of every great achievement, because no journey worth taking begins with absolute certainty, and no meaningful dream comes with a guarantee of success. The very nature of fear is to whisper limitations, to magnify risks, to convince us that staying safe is wiser than stepping into the unknown. But greatness has never been born in the comfort of safety. Greatness begins when someone dares to act in spite of the trembling, in spite of the doubts that weigh heavy on their chest, in spite of the possibility of failing in front of others. It begins with that first step into uncertainty, the moment when the desire to grow becomes stronger than the desire to stay hidden, when the thought of regret becomes more unbearable than the thought of falling short. Courage is not about erasing fear, it is about carrying it with us and moving forward anyway, using it as proof that what we're doing matters deeply. The most extraordinary stories of resilience, invention, and transformation were written by people who felt fear just as we do, but refused to let it decide the boundaries of their lives. They were willing to look fear in the eye and say, "You can walk beside me, but you will not lead." Every time we choose courage over fear, we expand the world around us. We discover new capacities within ourselves that were invisible when we clung to certainty. That first step may be small, almost invisible to others, but it shifts the ground beneath us in ways that change everything, because courage creates momentum, and momentum builds strength. Fear thrives in hesitation, in overthinking, in waiting for the perfect moment. But courage cuts through the noise with action, imperfect and raw, yet alive with possibility. Fear tells us that we are not ready, that we are not enough, that the risk is too high, but courage whispers back that readiness is created through doing, that enough is found in the trying, and that risk is the soil where possibility grows. When we choose courage, we allow ourselves to step into the arena of life fully present, with no promise of applause, but with the deep knowing that showing up is in itself a victory. The moment we act despite uncertainty, we loosen fear's grip, and even if the outcome is not what we envisioned, we discover something far more valuable: the strength to try again, the wisdom of experience, and the proof that we are capable of more than we once believed. Greatness does not demand the absence of fear. It demands the audacity to move forward while fear is still present, to walk into the unknown with shaky legs but an unshaken spirit. It is in that tension between fear pulling us back and courage pulling us forward that we are stretched into someone stronger, braver, and more alive than we were before. And every time we honor courage over fear, we not only change our own lives, we give silent permission for others to step forward too, reminding them through our example that uncertainty is not the end of the story. It is the birthplace of every beginning worth chasing. Failure as a teacher is one of the most powerful truths we can embrace, because every setback we face is not the end of the journey, but rather a doorway into growth, resilience, and a deeper understanding of who we are and what we are capable of becoming. When we fail, we are confronted with disappointment, embarrassment, and sometimes even heartbreak, but beneath those heavy emotions lies an invitation to learn lessons that success alone can never teach us. Failure strips away illusions, humbles our pride, and forces us to examine not only what went wrong, but also how we can rise differently the next time. It is through failing that we discover new strategies, sharpen our skills, and uncover hidden reserves of strength that remain dormant when life flows too smoothly. Every stumble is a mirror that reflects not weakness, but possibility. The possibility to adjust, to rebuild, to refine, and to approach our goals with a new depth of wisdom. The resilience we admire in others was not born from an unbroken string of victories, but from the scars and bruises of countless defeats that shaped them into people who could withstand pressure, rejection, and uncertainty without collapsing. Failure teaches patience when we want speed, persistence when we crave ease, and humility when we are tempted to believe that we are invincible. It reminds us that greatness is never achieved in a straight line, but through a jagged path of missteps, corrections, and relentless determination. Those who run from failure also run from the very growth that could transform them, while those who embrace it discover that each setback carves deeper layers of character, empathy, and courage into their lives. We often forget that the breakthroughs we celebrate, the inventions, the triumphs, the victories, are built upon a foundation of failed attempts that paved the way forward. Failure teaches us to let go of perfection, to accept that being human means stumbling, and to trust that stumbling forward is still progress. It is through failure that we learn to stand back up when everything in us wants to stay down, to rebuild when the pieces feel too broken, and to trust in the quiet truth that resilience is not about never falling, but about choosing to rise every single time we do. The path of growth is not found in avoiding failure, but in walking straight through it, carrying the lessons it offers, and allowing it to shape us into people capable of more than we ever imagined. Each failure whispers, "This is not the end." And when we listen, we realize that it is only another step in the long and beautiful process of becoming. The power of belief is one of the most transformative forces within the human spirit, because when we choose to believe in what seems beyond reach, we give ourselves permission to stretch into realms that fear and doubt would otherwise keep hidden from us. Belief is not blind optimism or wishful thinking, but a deep conviction that the gap between where we are and where we want to be can be crossed, even if we don't yet know how. It begins quietly as a thought, a whisper that says maybe it's possible, maybe I can, maybe there is more, and in that moment the human spirit expands beyond its current boundaries. Belief creates vision, and vision fuels action, and action births change. Without belief, even the smallest obstacles look like immovable mountains, but with belief, even mountains look like challenges that can be climbed one step at a time. The truth is, many of the breakthroughs that changed the course of history were carried by belief long before they were proven by evidence, because belief allows us to see possibilities that do not yet exist. It strengthens us in moments of weakness, because when everything outside of us says give up, belief whispers try again. It is belief that holds us steady when results don't appear right away, that fuels the persistence to keep moving forward when logic alone would tell us to quit. To believe is to act as though the invisible is already within reach, and in doing so, we create the space for it to become real. Belief is contagious too. When one person dares to live out their conviction, they ignite the faith of others who witness their courage, and suddenly what once seemed impossible begins to feel within reach for many. Our spirit does not expand in ease but in tension, in the moments when we stand on the edge of doubt and still choose to lean forward, and that choice is rooted in belief. Every dream, every invention, every triumph begins first in the unseen place of conviction, and it is belief that bridges the gap between the ordinary and the extraordinary. Without it, talent lies dormant, ideas remain untested, and potential never becomes reality. But with it, we open doors we never knew existed, endure storms we never thought we could weather, and discover strengths we never imagined were within us. Belief is the soil where courage grows, the spark that ignites resilience, the force that turns setbacks into stepping stones. And every time we choose to believe in what seems beyond reach, we expand not only our own spirit, but the collective spirit of those who are watching, reminding them that the limits we accept are often only illusions waiting to be broken by conviction. Vulnerability fuels strength because true courage is not found in pretending to have all the answers or hiding the fears that live inside us, but in admitting our doubts and daring to move forward anyway. And it is this raw honesty that transforms what feels impossible into something within reach. We often imagine strength as the absence of weakness, but real strength is born when we are willing to show up exposed, when we admit that we are unsure, that we might fail, that we are not invincible, and still we choose to act. Vulnerability is the birthplace of resilience, because it is in the moments when we stand unguarded, carrying both our hope and our fear, that we discover just how much we can endure and how deeply we can grow. When we dare to step into the unknown while fully aware of our imperfections, we stop waiting for perfection as a prerequisite to begin, and in doing so, we unlock a power that hiding will never give us. The act of admitting our doubts allows us to release the heavy armor of pretending, and once that armor falls away, we find ourselves lighter, freer, and more capable of rising. Vulnerability is not weakness. It is the truest sign of strength, because it means we are brave enough to risk being seen as we are, with no guarantees of success or approval. When we confess uncertainty but still take the leap, we prove to ourselves that strength is not about controlling the outcome, but about controlling the choice to try. Every impossible dream ever achieved was once held by someone who doubted, who questioned their own ability, who faced fear of judgment or failure. But instead of hiding those fears, they carried them into the fight and kept moving forward. This act of daring, fueled by vulnerability, is what makes the impossible possible, because it strips away the illusion that strength comes from being untouchable and replaces it with the truth that strength is forged in the fire of openness. Vulnerability builds trust within ourselves, because every time we step forward honestly, we remind our hearts that we are capable of surviving failure, rejection, and imperfection. And in that reminder, we build the unshakable resilience that allows us to endure. It is not the absence of fear that makes people great, but the presence of fear accompanied by the willingness to keep going. And this is only possible when we accept vulnerability as part of the journey. By embracing vulnerability, we invite growth, because only when we admit what we do not know can we truly learn. And only when we acknowledge our limits can we push beyond them. The paradox is that the more vulnerable we allow ourselves to be, the stronger we become, because we stop wasting energy on hiding and instead invest that energy into creating, building, and persisting. Vulnerability connects us to others as well, because when we admit we are scared but trying, we inspire others to do the same, and together we create a culture where daring becomes normal, where fear loses its power, and where the impossible becomes achievable. Strength built on vulnerability is unbreakable, because it is rooted not in the fragile facade of perfection, but in the enduring truth of authenticity. And it is this authenticity that fuels the kind of daring that turns limits into possibilities. Small steps create big change, because the dreams that feel impossible, the ones that seem too far, too heavy, or too overwhelming to ever reach, are not achieved through sudden leaps of perfection, but through consistent, imperfect action taken day after day, even when progress feels invisible. We often look at those who accomplish great things and imagine that they moved in one bold motion from where they were to where they are now. But the truth is that every story of transformation is built on countless small steps that no one applauded, no one celebrated, and sometimes no one even noticed. Those steps matter because they build momentum, and momentum is what carries us when motivation fades, when the path feels uncertain, and when doubt grows loud. Each small action is like laying a single brick, and while one brick may not look like much, the steady placing of brick upon brick over time creates walls, structures, and foundations strong enough to hold dreams that once felt impossible. Imperfect action is often the hardest to take, because it means moving forward without guarantees, without everything figured out, without the certainty that we are doing it right. But it is that very imperfection that allows us to begin instead of endlessly waiting for the perfect moment that never comes. Consistency beats intensity, because even the tiniest step repeated over time carves pathways that lead us somewhere new, while waiting for the big leap keeps us standing still. The courage to act, even clumsily, transforms the impossible into the inevitable, because every movement forward, no matter how small, chips away at the weight of impossibility. Big change is rarely visible in the beginning. It hides in the quiet persistence of showing up when results haven't yet appeared, in the unseen effort that builds strength behind the scenes, and in the willingness to keep stacking small victories until they create a tipping point. The dream does not demand that we be flawless. It demands that we be faithful, that we return again and again, that we commit to the process even when the outcome feels distant. Small steps remind us that progress is not about speed but about direction, and as long as we keep moving forward, we are already defeating the lie that says the dream cannot be reached. There is power in patience, in honoring the slow build, in trusting that a series of imperfect actions can create something extraordinary. And this power belongs to anyone willing to take the first step and then the next. What feels impossible today may one day be our reality, not because we leapt over every obstacle in one heroic motion, but because we refused to stop moving, because we chose to honor the process of growth through action, because we understood that impossible dreams are nothing more than possible dreams built brick by brick, step by step, day by day. Stories of resilience inspire possibility because when we witness people rise from struggle, when we see them confront pain, loss, and hardship yet still choose to stand and keep moving, we are reminded that nothing is beyond reach, that the limits we imagine are often far smaller than the strength we carry within us. There is something deeply human in the way resilience speaks, because it doesn't deny the existence of suffering or try to cover it with false positivity. Instead, it shows that brokenness and beauty can coexist, that scars are not the end of the story, but the evidence of survival and growth. Every story of resilience carries a message that speaks louder than advice or instruction. If they can endure, so can we. When someone rises from a place where hope seemed lost, they offer us a mirror into our own potential, a reminder that even in our darkest moments, there exists a light that cannot be extinguished. These stories matter because they are not about perfect people living perfect lives, but about ordinary people who chose to fight, to heal, to try again when everything inside them said stop. Resilience is contagious. When we encounter it in others, it awakens something in us that refuses to settle for despair. It challenges the voice inside that says our struggle is too heavy, our dream too far, our wounds too deep. The resilience of others becomes a map, not to follow step by step, but to remind us that pathways exist even when we cannot yet see them. Rising from struggle does not erase the pain that came before, but it transforms that pain into a source of power, showing us that wounds can shape wisdom, that setbacks can become stepping stones, that survival itself is an act of defiance against impossibility. When people share how they rose again, they give permission for others to believe in their own rise, planting seeds of hope in places where despair once lived. Each resilient story adds to a collective chorus that drowns out the lie of impossibility, showing us that the human spirit is capable of enduring storms, rebuilding after devastation, and creating meaning out of what once seemed unbearable. These stories show that strength is not about never falling, but about the choice to rise again and again, and in that rising, they remind us of the limitless resilience woven into our own being. When we see people who have faced the unimaginable and yet rebuilt lives of purpose and joy, we are reminded that possibility is not reserved for the fortunate few, but available to anyone willing to endure the process of standing back up. Resilience is proof that struggle does not define us, but refines us, shaping us into people who can face the impossible and slowly turn it into possible. And every time we hear or witness such a story, it leaves an imprint on our hearts, a quiet assurance that while pain is inevitable, so is the possibility of rising, and in that truth, nothing remains beyond our reach.